The head of the Wagner mercenary group has defended his armed mutiny in Russia, saying he had no intention to change the political regime. In an 11-minute audio recording, Yevgeny Prigozhin explains that his so-called march for justice was to prove the strengths of his men and the weakness of Moscow's security system and military leaders whom he blamed for mistakes in Ukraine. The Kremlin has said Mr. Prigozhin had agreed to go into exile in Belarus and that the fighters who joined the march on Moscow would not be prosecuted for treason. However, recent acts of rebellion by the Wagner mercenary group in Ukraine against Russia has continued to generate concerns in Africa, especially in countries where its leaders had earlier turned to the group to help reinforce their stay in office. Unfortunately, the aborted rebellion was believed to have brought unease to many parts of Africa, where some of the leaders who had earlier turned to the Wagner group now face the possibility that the private paramilitary organization could be weakened or even dismantled. Well, Rufai.
Okay.
Russia-Africa relations.
Russia-Africa relations. Okay, let's dial back a bit and let's talk a little bit about the Russian sentiment. Yevgeny Prigozhin used to be a chef, started up life owning a restaurant, and Putin loved his food so much. So he was known to be Putin's chef. But from there, he snowballed into other things, started buying armory and things like that, started fighting wars all over, built a very big security force called the Wagner Group. When the war started, Putin needed, war agents to fight for him, war contractors. Pretty much, that goes back in history to the time of Wellington and the likes. And he brought in Yevgeny Prigozhin to fight in a particular area, Bakhmut. He'd been fighting for some time, for about a year now. He's made some incursions, but Prigozhin had a lot of problems with Shoigu and Gerasimov. Because of the problem between Prigozhin and Shoigu and Gerasimov, Prigozhin will always make videos and say, oh, we need ammo. My guys are getting killed every time and all of that. We need ammo. But Shoigu and Gerasimov will always rebuff him. So he looks and he says, how can I do this? Let me make a big stance. And he went ahead, took Rostov-on-Don. After taking Rostov-on-Don, was marching to Moscow before they had a deal with Lukashenko. How does this relate to Africa? Prigozhin and his Wagner group has a lot of influence in Africa. Spans across the Sudan, up to Central African Republic. That's another war that has gone on for some time, the Seleka and the Anti-Balakas. Yeah. Spans up to Western Africa, Mali, where you had the Francophone holding sway before, but they've pushed out the French. When the French started to wind down on their Operation Barkhane, which means the big cat, they've pushed out the French. Now, Wagner is beginning to fill those areas to be able to fight insurgents across those areas. And Wagner is doing well because they are getting results. Those African leaders, most importantly as a result of the coup that have happened across the French-speaking African belt, they're in tune with Wagner. So what this means is that there's a dominance of Wagner around there. They're not fighting for free. They know what they're fighting for. But if Prigozhin could have matched on Putin, who says that Prigozhin cannot do the same for countries like Mali, for countries like Syria? And that's the fear, and that's the concern. Because if you could have been so daring to do that to Putin, who says Yevgeny Prigozhin cannot bring his own allies in, pretty much cause mutiny among the security forces in those countries, and march on a couple of African countries, which is the beginning of another colonialism. And that's why Africa must nip this in the bud. That's why the Americans are making a lot of noise about this. And that's why we must also look. On the African Union front, there's a lot that can be done. We need to be able to have a solid force that responds to our own internal crisis. We used to have the dominance of ECOMOG before, but that's no longer strong. That doesn't hold sway any longer. So how Africa will settle its own internal crisis will be what will reduce all of these incursions by the likes of Wagner and co.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says that what we're seeing in Russia is a movie, the first act, and that it's an unfolding story. So there will be other developments. Yesterday, President Putin addressed the nation in a televised address, he said, look, all the persons who moved against Russia, the Kremlin, will be punished. He still sees it as an act of treason. But at the same time, he praised those Wagner mercenaries who fought in Ukraine to help to pursue his own objectives. That same yesterday, Prigozhin also spoke from Belarus, where Lukashenko, the president of Belarus, is said to be the person who brokered the deal. And he said, look, his major issue is not to unseat Putin. His major issue is that the military, the Russian military, is unprofessional. What does this tell us? It tells us that there are cracks in Russia. Cracks in terms of, Putin's authority over the country, the fact that his authority is being questioned. And the fact that in Rostov-on-Don, there were persons who were even jubilating when the 8,000 mercenaries, not 25,000, as were previously reported, moved on Rostov and moved as far as 150 miles close to Moscow before the 24-hour operation was immediately called off. But the major issue here is the Wagner mercenaries in Africa. Now, the Wagner mercenaries, we've just been told by Sergei Lavrov, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia, that they will continue their operations in Africa. In other words, the Wagner mercenaries, they are part of the state. Some of them are also not part of the state. So it's a very complex, contradictory situation that we're facing. But as for Africa, African leaders have engaged the Wagner mercenaries in Sudan, in Mali, in Central African Republic. Lavrov tells us that, they are instructors. They are there to offer security assistance. But the main issue is that the Wagner Group is a private military company. That's the other way, the dignified way by which mercenaries are known. And in Central African Republic, they've caused a lot of mayhem. They are responsible for torture, for killing, and for the pillage of resources in Africa. This is the story in Sudan and elsewhere. So it's not as if Wagner mercenaries are a positive force in Africa. And this raises the question about leadership in Africa. African leaders do not provide an enabling environment for their people. They create problems, they create conflict, they thrive in conflict. And in an attempt to solve the problem, they go and look for these private military companies to come and help resolve the problem. An exception in this regard, we look in vain for an exception in this regard, in my view. And so what you have in Central African Republic, the authorities there, the sitting government says, we want to fight armed rebel groups. But it's not just about armed rebel groups. The Wagner Group in Mali, in Central African Republic, in Sudan, has been responsible for the theft of mineral resources. And why I say it's contradictory, its relationship with the Russian state, is that Russia, the Kremlin, is also complicit in building this monster. So what you have in Russia at the moment, between Putin and Prigozhin, whose name President Putin pointedly refused to mention yesterday in his televised address yesterday evening, is an internal fight, as President Joe Biden referenced it. But China and other countries are saying that the stability of Russia is important. And I think that the stability of Russia itself is what we should worry about. Already, the conflict the internal conflict in Russia has resulted in the price of crude oil going up because of fears about disruption in the supply, of crude oil, of energy supply within the international community. The price of wheat has also gone up, which was why, Rotus came yesterday and was warning about how bread makers are also saying, we won't be able to eat bread. I hope nobody will say, if they can't eat bread, give them cake. Because even cake is more expensive than bread in this environment. But to go back to Blinken, it's an unfolding story. But Africa's relationship with Russia, I believe, will continue. But African leaders also have a responsibility so that, we have an enabling environment for peace, stability, prosperity, and we do not have to sit down when there is a glitch, that famous word, in Russia. We have to sit down here and be worrying about how mercenaries from Russia impact upon the political and development process in Africa.
Absolutely. Now, just to take the words of EU foreign policy chief, where he says that the monster that Putin created with Wagner, the monster is biting him back. And I believe, as has already been said, that there are a number of lessons to be learned from the African continent, especially as has already been established that that Wagner has, come into different parts in Africa to work alongside, or by being invited by heads of government to work alongside them as a private military organization. Now, what this means is that the 24-hour mutiny in Russia, where you would assume that President Putin has some form of hold or control over Wagner, wouldn't have seen the light of day. Now, as you mentioned, Rufai, this is a red flag and a warning bell to African countries who invite Wagner to help them. We had an investigation in 2021 in Libya on some of the activities of Wagner whilst fighting alongside the government, the military in that country. One, as you've heard, is that they torture civilians. They lack a code of conduct. So there's nothing really to hold them to account. There's nothing that guides their mode of operation. Hence, anything literally can happen, as we saw over the weekend in Russia. And therefore, whilst African leaders want to parley or play ball or play with Wagner from Russia to help them in many areas selfish need to hold on to power or to fight against enemies in their territories, it is important to take certain lessons from there. That perhaps there needs to be a code of engagement, or perhaps a rule of engagement as to how they would operate with Wagner forces. What would prevent, what are the assurances of preventing what happened in Russia over the weekend happening in other countries? We've talked about what they've done in Central African Republic. We look at what they've done in Libya. We look at what they've done in Sudan and other countries, especially in the eastern parts of Africa, in the Middle East and eastern parts of Africa. And so the conversation then is, how do we manage this monster that is biting the architect of it in itself? As has already been said, Putin has given Perugin the opportunity to seek asylum in Belarus, and has said he would not prosecute his loyalists. However, Africa must take lessons from what happened over the weekend in Russia. Now, moving on to African news, here in Nigeria, Adewale Adeniyi has been decorated with his new rank of Comptroller General of Customs. It happened during a brief ceremony led by Vice President Kashim Shettima at the Presidential Villa in Abuja. Adeniyi takes over in an acting capacity until his official confirmation by the National Assembly.
An official decoration at the Presidential Villa precedes other ceremonial events at the Nigerian Customs Headquarters in Abuja, marking the assumption of office as the new acting Customs Comptroller General. The event is taking place a week after the announcement. This is because Wale Adeniyi was named acting CG while he was attending the Policy Commission and Council meetings at the World Customs Organization (WCO) in Brussels, Belgium. Back in the country and fully energized to lead the service, Adeniyi says he will prioritize efficiency in service delivery as the bedrock of trade facilitation and revenue generation. He also vows to tackle challenges like e-commerce, global supply chains, transnational crime networks, and illicit trade with modern technology.
But we must also be ready to be religious. I'm not a preacher, but I know the benefit of it. I know the benefit of keeping close to your God. Because there are so many diabolical things in the world. And there are so many diabolical people. And I bet you, as a Protestant, there's somebody who do not see good in you. And there's somebody who do not wish you well. But if you are close to your God, all those ones will never have any chance to do anything to you.
The new CG takes over from retired Colonel Hamid Ali, who has been CG of Customs since August 2015 until his removal last week by President Bola Tinubu. Hamid Ali says he is leaving the service better than he met it. He identifies the ongoing modernization project, the Customs Act, the construction of a new customs headquarters, and improved staff welfare as some of his achievements.
This administration is committed to adopting a bottom-up approach where the needs of their nation takes precedence over every other thing. We will prioritize efficiency in service delivery as the bedrock of trade facilitation and revenue generation. No longer shall encumbrances impede trade. We shall dismantle obstacles and foster a new culture of consultations and compliance.
The Nigerian Customs is one of the nation's highest revenue-generating agencies. In 2022, NCS generated 2.60 trillion naira revenue into the Federation account. This was only surpassed by the Federal Inland Revenue Service, which collected 10.1 trillion naira in revenue. The new CG hopes to improve on this with the help of a well-motivated staff.
Also, Malam Nuhu Ribadu yesterday officially assumed duties as the new National Security Advisor, NSA, with a pledge to restore order, rule of law, contain insecurity, and as well stabilize Nigeria, saying the time had come for Nigeria to enjoy peace and stability. On his part, the former NSA Major General Babagana Monguno, retired, said, and I quote, "Ribadu is well equipped, well qualified, well educated, and has a very deep understanding of the complexity of the security challenges confronting Nigeria." End of quote. Ribadu took over from Monguno following his appointment by President Bola Tinubu on June 19, 2023. According to him, the administration of President Tinubu has enormous responsibility to secure, stabilize, and ensure peace in all parts of the country. Well, congratulations to the newly decorated officers.
Yeah, I mean, congrats to them. Nothing much to say. They've been decorated and it's time to work. Yeah. I think Mr. Wale Adini has his work cut off for him in the customs. We have very, very, very leaky borders, I should say. Very porous, borders. And there's a lot, we have to do to be able to seal up those areas. And also we have problems of connivance with officers, with people and smugglers that bring things in. I mean, we know the big culture of what back in the days, that used to be called fire war. How smugglers would bring things in and all of that. And those things were done in connivance. So we need to be able to shut down things like that and routes like that. And also how they can man our very expansive borders, across the north, the south, and other parts of the country. For the National Security Advisor, we can only wish him well. He has an assistance with the EFCC. He's done some intelligence work with the police. And he will need to harmonize all the security forces, ensure that he sits in the middle of dispensing appropriate information to keep Nigeria safe and secure. He would need to work as regards this very nebulous concept of rejigging security architecture. And I say it's very nebulous because there are many things that come together to really form a security architecture. Part of the security architecture is also the economic architecture. So advisory as even regards the impact of the economy, these are going to be part of the studies and the things he has to do. Greatly as regards insecurity, the impact the economy has as regards insecurity, there's that also part. Also the impact of non-state actors, But what is most important is that for him, there will be three voices that will come to him now that he's in power. There's going to be the voice of reason. There's going to be the voice of sycophancy, right? And there's going to be the voice of association. Now he will make new friends just because people want to associate with him. The day he stopped being NSA, they're going to leave him alone. Those people don't care about your success or failure. All they care about is the fact that we are friends with the NSA and we influence decisions. That's the voice of association. Voice of sycophants are just like voice of association. They are full-on sycophants. They will tell him he's the best thing since sliced bread. He can never do wrong in their eyes, and they will mislead him. He should be careful, most careful of those voices. And guess what? Those voices are going to be more with him. Lastly, voice of reason. These are the smallest voices you will hear, but they are the most important. Those that will be able to tell you the truth in your face and say you're wrong. Look at it this way. They will not sound very loudly. They will not be boisterous. They will not be the voices that will print newspaper, congratulations to you on your birthday. but they will be the most important voices. Most importantly, you should be careful. You know, my father will always say something. My father will always say, what it means is those that don't want you to see it, they are not as much as those that are looking for that thing with you. When you're looking for something, people will say, oh, where did you keep it? They're looking for you. But most of the people that are looking at where's the whereabouts of that thing for you, they don't want you to see that thing. So there are more people that don't want him to succeed than those that want him to succeed. He should be very careful. And he should understand that the most important voice he would need would be the voice of reason over the voice of sycophants. I am sure the voices of sycophants have started calling him since yesterday. But one call he should not discard is the voice of reason. I wish him a lot of luck. It is well with him, it is well with Nigeria.
Okay, very good picks, in my view, as Controller General of Customs, and also Nuhu Ribadu as National Security Advisor. Let me start with Adewale Adeniyi. I knew him in our younger days when he was PRO for Customs. And I think that his appointment as Controller General of Customs will build confidence within the Customs service, a particular service that is troubled. There are many issues that Wale Adeniyi will meet as he assumes office. Aggrieved customs officers who have a lot of complaints about welfare, about promotions, about nepotism within customs. And many of them have been seeking a way forward and they couldn't succeed in that regard under Colonel Ahmed Ali as Controller General of Customs. Number two, his appointment as Controller General of Customs will build confidence to the extent that he's part of the system. He grew within the system, he retired within the system, and now, of course, he's there as Controller General. Now, Wale Adeniyi, as you can see, is wearing the uniform. Colonel Ahmed Ali refused to wear uniform of Customs as a military officer. He didn't even want to identify directly with the same persons, the same crew that he was appointed to lead by President Buhari. I guess that there will be many in Customs who will heave a sigh of relief that would let this outsider just go. So, because Wale Adeniyi is one of them. But above all, is Wale Adeniyi's credentials as a very disciplined officer, as a professional, as a man who is focused on the job. He's not the kind of person you go to and you say you are looking for certain advantages because he's your friend. If it is not possible, he will tell you it's not possible. So we expect to see under Wale Adeniyi's leadership in Customs a much more professional, a much more empathetic, in terms of the welfare of staff and their expectations within the Customs service. So congratulations to him. Now, National Security Advisor, Nuhu Ribadu, we also congratulate him. Nuhu Ribadu is very well known, to many Nigerians. He's run as chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, and also his emergence within the political arena at a point as a presidential candidate of the Action Congress of Nigeria, the ACN, which was when he and Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu became very close. And also his attempts to become governor in his home state. So what do you need to be a national security advisor? You need to understand statecraft. You need to understand public policy. You need to understand internal security. You also must have skills in terms of law enforcement. Now, these criteria that I have just outlined, Nuhu Ribadu combines them very well. He understands statecraft, having been in politics, having managed a major government agency. He understands public policy. He's well educated. He has a master's in law. He's been to Oxford. He's been a fellow here and there. So he has practical experience. He's a policeman. He also understands law enforcement. And of course, you cannot teach him about internal security. So he knows all of this. But more importantly, his emergence as National Security Advisor will also, again, as I said in the case of Wale Adeniyi, build confidence among the police. Only 2 policemen retired policemen have been national security advisor in this country. Gambo Jimeta and also Aliyu Guazo, you know, have only been policemen who have been in charge of national security. So I imagine that policemen will be celebrating that they have been recognized and that one of them is now national security advisor. He has a job cut out for him. I'm sure he understands that assignment, and he must be reminded that Nigerians have a lot of expectations because security is a major challenge in this country, and there are security challenges to be addressed from Borno State to the creeks in the South.
Well, I don't know if the word to say is congratulations or Godspeed to Mr. Waladini and, of course, to Malam Nuhu Ribadu, because the work ahead of them is not one that they ought to be rejoicing at this point. A number of people have talked about the security architecture and the insecurity in the nation and the work cut out for the new NSA. Well, we've already examined this a number of times on this show in terms of what he would have to do with the Niger Delta and oil theft. We'll be looking to him as well to handle properly the issue in the southeast and IPOB. We'll be looking at him to handle the issue with the with the herders and farmers, the Fulani extremism in some cases, as some people have described, Boko Haram still and ISWAP, and a number of other insecurity issues in Nigeria. These are the things that will be holding him to account. And so one day for congratulations, one day to celebrate this new achievement, but the rest of the days to hold him to account in tackling insecurity decisively in Nigeria. As we all know, insecurity has its impact on other aspects of society, on the economy, inflationary pressures, and the likes. And so congratulations and Godspeed. And with regards to the customs, it has already been said in terms of what we're looking forward to seeing from Mr. Adeni, but we must talk about smuggling and corruption in customs. And one of the things he had mentioned was that he was going to, in his speech yesterday, was that he was going to take on a technological approach to customs in Nigeria. This is something that we definitely must emphasize. When it comes to customs, it almost feels as if we're still in the Stone Age. And therefore, hopefully, we'll have sophisticated equipment and he will train, or the staff members or custom officials will be trained as to how to, number one, handle or relate with people, and also to do to discharge their duties efficiently and and without corruption. I'm hoping that we'll see some cases being brought to book, because we talk about these issues a lot of times, but it seems as if nothing is being done, and corruption in the high places would not allow things to slide even at the very bottom rung of the ladder. Again, congratulations and Godspeed.